Hello and welcome to Industry or Residential Arts Centre's Facebook page and today's edition of The Man Who Knows Everything. That is me. I am he. And the way this works is every day I give you a topic and you have 24 hours to find out 10 facts about that topic, and I come on the next day and I give you my 10 facts. If you've got a fact that I don't give, you've technically beaten the man who knows everything, but as we all know, there is only facts I don't give, not facts I don't know. So yesterday was all about rainforests, and then I'll give you today's topic of the Beatles. So if you're joining us for today, then I'm about to give you 10 facts about the Beatles. At the end of this video, I'll give you tomorrow's topic, and you're going to have 24 hours to find out as much as you can about that topic. So here are my 10 facts about the Beatles. First one, it's quite a broad one. The fact that the Beatles were an English band that originated and formed in Liverpool in the 1960s. In fact, in the year 1960 was when they got together. They're known as one of the most influential bands of all time, if not the most influential band of all time. And the band members comprising the Beatles were John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. Before then, John Lennon had got his own band with some other people in 1957, and various members of the existing Beatles, what was to be the Beatles, joined that band at different stages, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Well, fact number two is that the root of their music was in a genre of music called skiffle. And it's a music genre with like jazz and blues and American folk influences and stuff like that, and skiffle is a term that originated in the United States and became very popular in the UK in the 1950s. Aside from skiffle, they were also influenced by beat music and British rock and roll. So beat music is also known as Mersey beat, after the bands from Liverpool and nearby areas by the River Mersey. See, when you do some research about the Beatles, you might hear about Mersey beat, and that's why it's called Mersey beat, because of the river that runs nearby where all those bands are situated. So, fact number three is the fact that the Beatles had lots of different names to begin with. So John Lennon in 1957 started his own band, and first of all they were called Blackjacks, then they were called the Quarrymen, a little skiffle band, and then one of their members, Stuart Sutcliffe at the time, suggested they change the name to the Beatles, as in Beatles. Then they changed it again to the Silver Beatles, like the little creature, and then they changed it to Silver Beatles, Beatles, and then eventually they settled on the Beatles. So they've been around for ages, but as a band, they were only together for 10 years. So they've been producing music for a decade. And in them 10 years in the UK, they released 12 studio albums. Now, there's a bit of debate about how many albums they released, because about what constitutes an album. Some things were compilations and some things were released differently in different countries. But generally, they released 12 studio albums in the UK across that decade. And then in 1970, they broke up, and each of the members went on to release a solo studio album themselves as well. Fact number four is that the Beatles might only have been making music together for about a decade, but that day stopped them from taking over the world. Throughout their run in America, 14 of their albums went straight in at number one in America. Now, you might be thinking, on 14 albums, they only reached 12. That's what I was talking about in the previous factors. There's a bit of debate about what constitutes an album. So to go in at number one 14 times in the US is an incredible achievement for any artists. They got in at number one of 5 compilation albums as well, which were released after their split. And the group as a whole, across their entire career, has got a whopping 19 number one albums in the US. That's more than anyone else in the United States by a long shot. So that was fact number 4, that the Beatles have had more number one albums in the United States than any other artist or band, anyone. Which ain't bad for a group of lads from Liverpool, eh? So, fact number 5 is not only their albums sell well for the Beatles in the United States, but their singles have just been as popular as well. So they've got the most US #1 singles as well. So 20 of them went to #1 between 1960s and 70s. And among the world classics that you might have heard of, like Love Me Do, of An Old Jand, Can't Buy Me Love, and Hard Day's Night. They've had a bit of competition from people like Mariah Carey and Rihanna. They've had a pop and had a try, but the Beatles, as it stands, they still hold the world record. I think they've been matched by Adele at some point. But yeah, there's been no doubt that the Beatles are one of the greatest bands the world's ever seen, and they might not have been around for the longest time, as I said before, but they definitely made the most of their few years together. Fact number 6 is that they are also the best-selling group. Now, in recent years, they've had a bit of competition from groups like One Direction, and they've attempted to dethrone the Beatles and claim many of their Guinness World Records, but one title they haven't taken during their run was one of the best-selling groups. So the Beatles still hold the record for having sold more than 1 billion units all around the world. So 1 billion physical record sales around the world, which is absolutely incredible. So fact number 7 is that with 129 songs to his name that is either co-written or written that have charted in the UK, Paul McCartney has had the most songs to feature in the UK singles chart, 129 of them. An astonishing 91 of those singles reached the top 10, and 33 of them made it to #1. So Paul McCartney has written the most singles that have ever made it into the UK charts, either as a solo artist or as ones that he's co-written. So Paul McCartney has 129 songs that he's written feature in the UK charts. Fact number 8 is that another interesting record that the Beatles hold is that Abbey Road holds the record for being the album with the longest span between its releases at #1. So when it was first released in 1970, it spent 17 weeks at #1, and then nearly 50 years later they released a 50th anniversary edition of Abbey Road, and that went straight to #1 as well. And so yeah, it was 49 years, 252 days between the releases. So they held the record for an album that has been at #1 in 2 different times, but the longest time between those releases. There we are. And in fact, they beat their own record, because the 50th anniversary edition of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band returned to the top spot in June 2017 after 49 years and 125 days. So the Beatles beat their own record. Fact number 9, bit of a sad fact, but it's a fact nonetheless. So in 1980, John Lennon sadly was killed as he was shot in New York outside his apartment building. So he met a bit of a tragic end, unfortunately, and all 3 members of the Beatles who were remaining put a song together and recorded all those years ago in John Lennon's honour. And fact number 10 is about his legacy. So John Lennon obviously was the founder member of the Beatles, wrote many of their songs, and they've got many memorable songs in their collection, but it seems the one written by John Lennon is the most influential. So he wrote the song Yesterday, and it's the most popular of them all. That's because the track, which was penned by Lennon and McCartney, it's been covered more than 1,600 times. So there are 1,600 cover versions of the song Yesterday. Loads of different performers have covered it, from people like Frank Sinatra, people like Boyz II Men, and as a result, the song has now got a place in the Guinness Book of Records for the song that has been most covered in all time. So those are my 10 facts about the Beatles. And draw inspiration from the Beatles, tomorrow's topic is going to be all about the history of music production in terms of recordings. So we can't go back too far. Like I want to look at the history of people being able to access music rather than going to hear it live. So you might have some knowledge yourself. You might have some books you can look at, or you can get an adult to help you look it up on the internet. And I'll be back tomorrow at 1:00, all about 10 facts for music production. And I'll see you then. Stay safe, stay home, and stay creative. Ta-ra a bit.